The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the quiet cemetery. Jonathan Hayes stood in front of a small grave marked with a polished marble headstone. It read, "Ethan Hayes, beloved son." He sighed deeply, his shoulders heavy with grief that never seemed to fade no matter how many years passed. Every Sunday, rain or shine, Jonathan came here. For him, it wasn't just about remembering Ethan. It was about holding on to what was left of his son and to pieces of himself that felt shattered after the accident. Jonathan had built an empire from scratch. His name was synonymous with success, innovation, and wealth. People admired him for his sharp mind and relentless drive. But behind closed doors, he was a broken man. The death of his only child had left a void so vast that nothing could fill it. Not money, not power, not even the love of his wife, Claire. They tried to support each other through their pain, but over time they grew distant, retreating into their own worlds of sorrow. That day, however, something unusual caught Jonathan's attention. As he knelt down to place fresh flowers at Ethan's grave, he noticed movement out of the corner of his eye. Turning slightly, he saw a boy sitting cross-legged near another headstone a few feet away. At first glance, the boy looked ordinary, perhaps 8 or 9 years old. But there was something unsettling about him. His clothes were dirty and oversized, as if borrowed from someone much larger. His hair stuck out in messy tufts, damp from the light drizzle falling around them. In his hands, he clutched a tattered teddy bear, its fur matted and one eye missing. Jonathan frowned. What was a child doing alone in a cemetery? Wasn't he scared? Most kids would find such a place eerie, especially as the daylight waned and the air grew colder. Yet this boy seemed completely at ease, almost as if he belonged there. Curiosity got the better of Jonathan, and he decided to approach him. "Hey," he called out softly, trying not to startle the boy. "What are you doing here?" The boy didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned his head slowly, his wide eyes meeting Jonathan's. There was a depth in those eyes, an intensity that seemed far beyond his years. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the boy spoke. "I'm talking to my friend," he said simply, his voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. "Your friend?" Jonathan echoed, glancing at the headstone next to which the boy sat. He didn't recognize the name engraved on it. "Who's your friend?" The boy hesitated before replying. "Ethan." Jonathan froze. His heart skipped a beat, and then began, pounding wildly against his chest. "What did you say?" he asked sharply, taking a step closer. "I said Ethan," the boy repeated, unfazed by Jonathan's sudden reaction. "He's my friend." "But how do you know Ethan?" Jonathan stammered, confusion clouding his thoughts. Ethan had been an only child, and though he'd been friendly, he hadn't mentioned having close friends outside of school. Besides, Ethan had been gone for years now. How could this boy possibly claim to know him? "He told me stories," the boy said matter-of-factly, hugging the teddy bear tighter to his chest, "about his dad who works all the time and his mom who likes to bake cookies, and about his dog Max who used to chase squirrels in the backyard." Jonathan's knees nearly buckled under the weight of shock. This couldn't be real. No one, except family, knew these intimate details about Ethan's life, not even his teachers or classmates. Who was this boy? And how could he possibly know things that only someone very close to Ethan would? Before Jonathan could press further, the boy abruptly changed the subject. "Do you miss him?" he asked, tilting his head curiously. Jonathan blinked, taken aback by the directness of the question. Of course he missed Ethan more than anything, but hearing it spoken aloud made the ache in his chest sharper, more unbearable. "Yes," he admitted hoarsely. "Every single day." The boy nodded solemnly as if he understood exactly what Jonathan was feeling. Then, without warning, he stood up and brushed off the dirt from his pants. "You should go home," he said. "It's getting late." Jonathan opened his mouth to protest, but the boy was already walking away, disappearing between the rows of graves. Shaken, Jonathan watched until the boy vanished completely, leaving him standing alone in the fading twilight. Questions swirled in his mind like a storm. Who was that boy? Why did he know so much about Ethan? And most importantly, why did his presence feel different? Something about the encounter lingered in Jonathan's thoughts long after he returned to his car and drove home. That night, as he lay awake staring at the ceiling, Jonathan couldn't shake the image of the boy's face, or the strange sense of familiarity he'd felt when looking into those piercing eyes. It was as if he'd seen them somewhere before, though he couldn't quite place where. Whatever the truth might be, one thing was certain. This meeting wasn't random. Somehow, someway the boy was connected to Ethan, and Jonathan was determined to uncover the mystery. The next morning, Jonathan woke up with a heavy feeling in his chest. The boy from the cemetery haunted his thoughts, refusing to leave him alone. He replayed their conversation over and over again in his mind, trying to make sense of it. How could a stranger, especially a child, know so much about Ethan? It was impossible yet undeniable. Every detail the boy had mentioned was accurate, down to the smallest memory. Even Max, the family's golden retriever who had passed away years ago, had been brought up. No one outside the Hayes household should have known that. Claire noticed her husband's distracted demeanor during breakfast. She placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Jonathan, is everything okay?" she asked, concern etched on her face. He hesitated, unsure whether to tell her about the boy. Claire had always been sensitive when it came to anything related to Ethan. Talking about their son often reopened old wounds for both of them. But this wasn't just about Ethan. It was something more. Something strange. After a moment, Jonathan decided to share what had happened. "There was a boy at the cemetery yesterday," he began cautiously. "He claimed to know Ethan." Claire froze, her fork hovering mid-air. "What do you mean, claimed?" "He said they were friends," Jonathan continued, choosing his words carefully. "And he knew things only someone close to Ethan would know. Like how Max used to chase squirrels or how much you loved baking cookies." Claire's eyes widened in disbelief. "That's not possible," she whispered. "Ethan didn't talk about those things with anyone outside our family. Are you sure you heard him correctly?" "I'm certain," Jonathan replied firmly. "He even mentioned my work schedule. He said Ethan told him stories about how I was always busy." A long silence followed, broken only by the ticking of the clock on the wall. Claire looked troubled, her brow furrowed as if she were piecing together a puzzle. Finally, she spoke. "Do you think someone sent him? Maybe a prank, or maybe someone trying to get to us?" Jonathan shook his head. It didn't feel like a prank. There was something about him, sincere, almost innocent. But also, he trailed off, struggling to find the right word. "Different." "Different how?" Claire pressed. "I don't know," Jonathan admitted. "It's hard to explain. He seemed older somehow. Not in age, but in the way he carried himself. And his eyes." He paused, recalling the intensity of the boy's gaze. They looked like they'd seen too much. Claire sighed deeply, rubbing her temples. "This is insane. A random boy showing up at Ethan's grave and knowing all these private details? It doesn't make any sense." "I know," Jonathan agreed. "But I can't ignore it. I need to find out who he is." Later that day, Jonathan returned to the cemetery, hoping to catch another glimpse of the mysterious boy. He wandered among the rows of graves, scanning the area for any sign of him. But the boy was nowhere to be found. Frustrated, Jonathan sat down on a bench near Ethan's grave, his mind racing. Where had the boy gone? And why did he feel so drawn to him? As he sat there lost in thought, a soft voice startled him. "You're back." Jonathan turned quickly to see the boy standing behind him, his tattered teddy bear clutched tightly in his arms. This time, Jonathan studied him more closely. His clothes were still dirty and oversized, but there was an air of calmness about him that felt oddly comforting. Despite his disheveled appearance, the boy exuded a quiet confidence, as if he belonged exactly where he was. "Yes, I'm back," Jonathan said, forcing a smile. "I wanted to talk to you again." The boy nodded, as if he'd expected this. "About Ethan?" "About everything," Jonathan corrected, Who are you? How do you know so much about my son? The boy tilted his head, considering the question. My name is Liam, he said finally. And I told you, I'm Ethan's friend. But Ethan hasn't been here for years, Jonathan pointed out, his voice tinged with frustration. How could you possibly know him? Liam shrugged, unaffected by Jonathan's tone. Time isn't the same for everyone, he said cryptically. For me, it's like layers. Some people stay in one layer, while others move between them. Jonathan stared at him, baffled. What are you talking about, layers? That doesn't make any sense. It will, Liam assured him, his expression unreadable. Someday. Before Jonathan could respond, Liam changed the subject. Why do you come here every week? He asked, gesturing toward Ethan's grave. To remember him, Jonathan answered without hesitation. To keep him close. Liam nodded thoughtfully. Do you think he'd want you to be sad all the time? The question caught Jonathan off guard. He hadn't expected such insight from a child. Of course not, he replied softly. But losing him, it's hard. It feels like part of me is missing. I understand, Liam said simply. But sadness isn't the only way to remember someone. Sometimes happiness works better. Jonathan frowned, unsure what to make of this advice. What do you mean? When you think of Ethan, don't just focus on the pain, Liam explained. Think about the good times, the laughter, the smiles. Keep those memories alive and he'll always be with you. For a moment, Jonathan was speechless. The boy's words resonated deeply, touching a part of him he hadn't realized was still raw. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could say anything, Liam stood up abruptly. It's getting late, the boy said, glancing at the darkening sky. You should go home. Wait, Jonathan called after him. Can I take you? Somewhere? You shouldn't be out here alone. Liam hesitated, then nodded slowly. Okay. On the drive back to Jonathan's estate, the car was filled with an awkward silence. Liam sat quietly in the passenger seat, staring out the window as the city lights blurred past. Jonathan stole glances at him, wondering how such a young boy could possess such wisdom, and why he seemed so comfortable in situations most children would find terrifying. When they arrived at the mansion, Claire greeted them at the door, her expression a mix of curiosity and unease. Who's this? She asked, eyeing Liam warily. This is Liam, Jonathan introduced. He's a friend. Claire raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Instead, she invited Liam inside, offering him a warm meal and a change of clothes. As they settled into the living room, Liam surprised them both by wandering through the house as if he'd been there before. He stopped in front of a bookshelf, running his fingers along the spines of several books. Then he moved to the mantel, where framed photographs of Ethan were displayed prominently. You look happy here, Liam remarked, pointing to one photo in particular. It showed Ethan laughing as he held Max's leash, the dog bounding ahead, excited. Claire watched Liam closely as he stood in front of the mantel, his fingers tracing the edge of a framed photograph. The image showed Ethan laughing, his arms wrapped around Max's neck as the dog tried to pull him forward. It was one of her favorite pictures, full of life and joy, but seeing Liam interact with it sent chills down her spine. You look happy here, Liam said softly, more to himself than to anyone else. Then, turning to Jonathan and Claire, he added, Ethan, love this day. Jonathan exchanged a glance with Claire, both of them stunned into silence. How could Liam possibly know that? They had never shared stories of Ethan with anyone outside their immediate family. Even their closest friends only knew fragments of his personality, not specific moments like this. Liam, Claire began hesitantly, stepping closer to him. How do you know so much about Ethan? The boy didn't answer right away. Instead, he placed the photo back on the mantel and turned to face them. His expression was calm, almost serene, but there was a flicker of something deeper in his eyes, something neither Jonathan nor Claire could quite place. Finally, he spoke. Ethan told me about it. But when? Jonathan asked, frustration creeping into his voice. When did he tell you? Liam shrugged, unfazed by Jonathan's tone. Time doesn't work the same for everyone, he repeated, echoing his earlier cryptic statement. For some people, it's like layers. You can move between them, if you need to. Claire frowned, shaking her head slightly. That doesn't make sense. Are you saying you've been visiting Ethan somehow? Liam nodded slowly, his gaze steady. In a way, yes. The room fell silent as Jonathan and Claire processed this revelation. It sounded absurd, impossible even, and yet deep down they couldn't dismiss it entirely. There was something about Liam, his presence, his words, that felt undeniably real. Whether it was grief clouding their judgment or something far more profound, neither of them could say for sure. Over the next few days, Liam became an unexpected part of their lives. He stayed at the mansion, sleeping in Ethan's old room, a decision that made Claire uneasy but which Jonathan insisted on. Despite her reservations, Claire couldn't deny that Liam seemed to bring a strange sense of peace to the house. For the first time in years, laughter echoed through the halls again. Liam would ask questions about Ethan, sharing snippets of memories that no outsider should have known. Each detail felt like a gift, a reminder of the son they had lost. One evening, after dinner, Jonathan found Liam sitting alone in the living room, flipping through an old photo album. It was one Claire had painstakingly put together after Ethan's passing, a collection of moments frozen in time. When Jonathan approached, he noticed something odd. Several photos appeared to be different from how he remembered them. In one picture, Ethan was standing beside another boy, someone who hadn't been there when the photo was originally taken. The second boy looked eerily familiar. Liam, Jonathan said sharply, pointing to the image. Who is that? Liam glanced up, his expression unreadable. It's me, he replied simply. Jonathan's breath caught in his throat. He grabbed the album and flipped through the pages frantically. Sure enough, Liam appeared in multiple photos, playing with Ethan in the backyard, sitting at the kitchen table during birthday celebrations, even posing with Max in the snow. None of these images matched the original version stored in digital files or tucked away in boxes. Someone had altered them, or perhaps created entirely new ones. This isn't possible, Jonathan muttered, sinking onto the couch beside Liam. These photos weren't like this before. How did you get in them? Liam studied him for a moment, then sighed. I told you, I'm Ethan's friend. We spent a lot of time together. Just because you don't remember doesn't mean it didn't happen. But I would remember, Jonathan exclaimed, his voice rising. If you were really part of our lives, we'd know. Not everything happens in the same layer, Liam explained patiently. Some things exist where you can't see them, until it's time. Claire walked into the room just then, drawn by the sound of raised voices. What's going on? She asked, looking between Jonathan and Liam. Jonathan held up the photo album, his hands trembling. Look at these pictures. Liam says he's been here all along, with Ethan, but none of this makes any sense. Claire took the album from him and flipped through the pages. Her eyes widened as she saw the altered images. She sank into a chair, her face pale. How is this happening? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Liam leaned forward, his demeanor unusually serious. You're not ready to understand everything yet, but I'm here to help. That's why I came. Help. With what? Claire demanded, her voice tinged with desperation. We've already lost Ethan. What more could you possibly do? I'm here to help you heal, Liam said gently. Both of you. Losing someone you love leaves scars that don't fade easily. But holding on to pain too tightly keeps you stuck. You deserve to move forward, not forget Ethan, but honor him by living fully again. His words struck a chord with both Jonathan and Claire. They had spent years trapped in their grief, unable to let go of the past. Yet hearing it from Liam, a boy who seemed to exist outside the boundaries of normal reality, felt different. It wasn't just advice. It was permission. As the days passed, Liam continued to reveal pieces of himself and his connection to Ethan. He shared stories of their adventures together, describing places they had explored and games they had played. Some of these tales seemed fantastical, like the time they supposedly built a treehouse in the middle of nowhere, or rode bikes through fields of wildflowers that stretched endlessly. But every story carried a kernel of truth, a reflection of Ethan's spirit that resonated deeply with Jonathan and Claire. Still, questions lingered. Who, or what, was Liam, really? Was he a ghost? A figment of their imagination? Or something else entirely? Jonathan decided to dig deeper, hiring private investigators to look into Liam's background. If the boy truly existed, there would be records, birth certificates, school enrollments, medical histories, something to prove he was real. The results came back weeks later and they were baffling. There was no trace of Liam anywhere. No birth records, no social security number, nothing to suggest he belonged to this world. It was as if he had materialized out of thin air. Confronting Liam about the findings, Jonathan felt a mix of anger and fear. "Who are you really?" he demanded, his voice shaking. "Why can't we find anything about you?" Liam met his gaze without flinching. "Because I'm not from here anymore," he said quietly. "I promised Ethan I'd take care of you. That's all you need to know." Despite his frustration, Jonathan couldn't argue with the sincerity in Liam's voice. Whatever the truth might be, one thing was clear. Liam had come into their lives for a reason. And though he couldn't explain it, Jonathan began to feel a glimmer of hope, a fragile but undeniable belief that maybe, just maybe, healing was finally within reach. The revelation that Liam didn't exist in any official records left Jonathan reeling. He sat alone in his study late one night, staring at the investigator's report spread across his desk. The pages were filled with notes and highlighted sections, all pointing to the same conclusion: Liam wasn't real, at least not in the way most people understood reality. There was no trace of him anywhere. No birth certificate, no school enrollment, no medical history, nothing. It was as if he had simply appeared out of thin air. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. His mind raced with questions. Who, or what, was Liam? Was he a ghost? A figment of their imagination? Or something else entirely? None of it made sense. Yet, despite the impossibility of it all, Jonathan couldn't deny the impact Liam had already had on their lives. Since the boy's arrival, the heavy fog of grief that had clouded their home for years seemed to lift ever so slightly. For the first time since Ethan's passing, there were moments of laughter, warmth, and even hope. But this new information complicated everything. If Liam wasn't human, if he wasn't bound by the rules of this world, then what did that mean for them? What was his purpose here? And why had he chosen them? The next morning, Jonathan sought out Liam. He found him sitting in the backyard under the shade of an old oak tree, the same spot where Ethan used to play with Max. Liam was sketching in a notebook, his brow furrowed in concentration. When Jonathan approached, the boy looked up and smiled faintly. "Can we talk?" Jonathan asked, his voice tense. Liam nodded, closing the notebook and setting it aside. "I knew you'd have more questions." Jonathan took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "You told me you're not from here anymore. What does that mean? Are you a ghost?" Liam tilted his head, considering the question. "Not exactly," he replied after a moment. "I'm not like the people you see every day. I'm here because Ethan asked me to be." "Ethan asked you?" Jonathan repeated, incredulous. "How is that even possible? He's gone." "Yes, he's gone from here," Liam said gently. "But that doesn't mean he's completely gone. Some people leave behind pieces of themselves, in memories, in love, in the connections they make. Those pieces can still reach out if you know how to listen." Jonathan shook his head, struggling to grasp what Liam was saying. "So you're telling me Ethan sent you? To do what exactly?" "To help you heal," Liam answered simply. "Both of you. You've been carrying so much pain for so long. Ethan wanted to make sure you didn't lose yourselves in it. Healing." The word echoed in Jonathan's mind, stirring emotions he had buried deep inside. He thought about the countless nights he had spent lying awake, haunted by guilt and regret. He thought about Claire, who had tried so hard to hold them together, but had eventually retreated into her own silence. They had both been drowning, unable to find solid ground beneath their feet. Could Liam really be the lifeline Ethan had sent to pull them back? But why now? Jonathan asked, his voice cracking. Why wait so many years? Liam shrugged. Sometimes people aren't ready to hear the message right away. Grief takes time. But when the moment comes, it's important to act quickly before the wounds get too deep. Jonathan sank onto the grass beside Liam, overwhelmed by the weight of his words. And what happens when you're done helping us? Will you just disappear? Liam hesitated, his expression softening. I don't belong here forever. My job is to guide, not to stay. But I'll be with you until you no longer need me. The finality of Liam's statement hit Jonathan like a punch to the gut. Part of him wanted to cling to the boy, to beg him to stay indefinitely. But another part, the rational part, knew that Liam's presence was temporary. That was the nature of healing. It required letting go over and over again. Over the following weeks, Liam continued to weave himself into the fabric of their lives. He shared stories about Ethan, filling in gaps Jonathan and Claire hadn't realized existed. He described Ethan's quirks, the way he hummed while brushing his teeth, the secret stash of candy he kept under his bed, the dreams he had of becoming an astronaut. Each detail felt like a gift, a reminder of the vibrant life their son had lived. One evening, as they sat around the dining table, Liam turned to Claire and asked, "Do you remember the cookies Ethan loved so much?" Claire blinked, caught off guard by the question. "Of course," she said softly. "Chocolate chip with extra vanilla. He always begged me to bake them." "Why don't you make them again?" Liam suggested. "For old time's sake." Claire hesitated, her hands trembling slightly. Baking? Those cookies had been one of her favorite traditions with Ethan, but after his death she had stopped. The thought of making them without him had felt unbearable. Now, looking at Liam's encouraging smile, she felt a flicker of resolve. "I think I will," she said finally, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. As Claire worked in the kitchen later that night, Jonathan joined her, watching, silently as she measured flour and cracked eggs. The sweet aroma of chocolate and vanilla soon filled the air, bringing back a flood of memories. When the cookies were finally baked and cooled, they sat together at the kitchen counter, eating them in silence. For the first time in years, the taste brought comfort instead of sorrow. Liam also encouraged Jonathan to reconnect with his passions. "You used to love building things," Liam reminded him one afternoon, gesturing toward the dusty tools in the garage. "Why don't you start again?" At first, Jonathan resisted. He hadn't touched those tools since before Ethan's accident, afraid of confronting the memories they stirred. But Liam persisted, nudging him gently until he relented. Slowly, tentatively, Jonathan began tinkering again, first fixing a broken chair, then constructing a small birdhouse. With each project, he felt a little lighter, as if shedding layers of grief he hadn't realized he was carrying. Through it all, Liam remained a constant presence, guiding them with patience and wisdom, far beyond his years. Yet, even as Jonathan and Claire grew closer to him, they couldn't ignore the growing sense that his time with them was limited. One morning, as Jonathan walked past Ethan's room, he noticed Liam standing by the window, bathed in golden sunlight. The sight stopped him in his tracks. "It's almost time, isn't it?" Jonathan asked quietly. Liam turned to face him, his expression serene. "Yes," he admitted. "But don't be sad. This isn't goodbye. It's just the next step." Tears welled up in Jonathan's eyes, but he nodded, accepting the truth. Whatever Liam was, a guardian, a messenger, or something else entirely, he had given them a priceless gift, the chance to heal, to honor Ethan's memory not through pain, but through love. As the days passed, Jonathan and Claire prepared themselves for Liam's departure, knowing that the lessons he had taught them would stay with them forever. Though they didn't fully understand the mystery of his existence, they were grateful for the laughter he had brought back into their home, for the memories he had revived, and for the hope he had reignited in their hearts. The days leading up to Liam's departure were bittersweet for Jonathan and Claire. They knew the boy wouldn't stay forever, but the thought of saying goodbye still weighed heavily on their hearts. Despite their sadness, they couldn't deny the profound impact he had made on their lives. In just a short time, Liam had helped them reconnect with memories of Ethan, not as sources of pain, but as treasures to cherish. He had reminded them that love endures, even when life feels unbearable. Every interaction with Liam carried a sense of finality now. Whether it was sharing meals at the dining table, working together in the garage, or simply sitting quietly under the oak tree in the backyard, Jonathan and Claire found themselves treasuring each moment more deeply than before. They laughed more often, talked openly about Ethan, and allowed themselves to feel joy again without guilt. It was as if Liam had unlocked a door they had long kept closed, letting light flood into spaces that had been dark for years. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, the three of them gathered in the living room. The atmosphere was calm, yet tinged with an unspoken understanding. Something significant was about to happen. Liam sat cross-legged on the floor, his tattered teddy bear resting beside him. Jonathan and Claire perched on the couch, watching him intently. "I want you to know how much you've changed us," Claire said softly, breaking the silence. Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes shone with gratitude. "You've brought Ethan back to us, not in the way we lost him, but in a way that helps us remember who he was. Thank you." Liam smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in his expression. "I didn't do anything special," he replied modestly. "You already had everything you needed inside you, I just helped you find it." "But how did you know?" Jonathan asked, leaning forward. "How did you know exactly what we needed?" Liam paused, choosing his words carefully. "Ethan showed me," he said finally. "He told me about your work ethic, your dedication, your strength, and he also told me about your fears, how you blamed yourself for things outside your control. He wanted you to forgive yourselves and move forward." The mention of self-blame struck a nerve. Jonathan had spent countless nights replaying the events leading up to Ethan's accident, wondering what he could have done differently. Claire, too, had carried her own burdens, questioning whether she should have noticed signs of trouble earlier. Hearing Liam speak those truths aloud felt like a weight lifting off their shoulders. "Ethan forgave you a long time ago," Liam continued. "Now it's time for you to forgive yourselves." Claire wiped away tears streaming down her cheeks. "It's not easy," she admitted. "But I think I'm ready to try." Jonathan nodded in agreement, reaching over to take Claire's hand. For so many years they had drifted apart, each retreating into their own grief. Now, thanks to Liam, they felt closer than ever, like partners navigating the same stormy sea instead of strangers adrift in separate boats. As the days turned into weeks, Liam became quieter, almost as if he were preparing them for his absence. He still joined them for meals and activities, but there was a noticeable shift in his demeanor. His movements grew slower, his presence less tangible. Sometimes when Jonathan or Claire reached out to touch him, their hands passed through empty air. Other times they would turn a corner and catch only a glimpse of him disappearing down a hallway. One morning, Jonathan woke to find Liam standing by the window in Ethan's old room. Bathed in soft, golden light, the boy looked ethereal, almost otherworldly. His teddy bear lay forgotten on the bed, its worn fur glowing faintly in the sunlight. "It's time," Liam said simply, turning to face Jonathan. Jonathan swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "Are you sure?" Liam nodded. "Yes, you don't need me anymore." "That's not true," Jonathan protested, his voice cracking. "We'll always need you. You've become part of our family. You'll always have me," Liam reassured him. "Just not in the way you're used to. Remember what I told you. Some connections transcend time and space. Our bond isn't ending. It's transforming." Claire appeared in the doorway, her eyes red from crying. She walked over to Liam and knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around him in a tight embrace. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." Liam hugged her back, his small frame surprisingly strong. When he pulled away, his face was serene. "Take care of each other," he said. "And keep Ethan's spirit alive. That's all he ever wanted." With that, Liam stood up and took a step toward the window. As he did, the golden light surrounding him grew brighter, enveloping him completely. Jonathan and Claire shielded their eyes, unable to look directly at the brilliance. When they opened them again, Liam was gone. The house felt eerily quiet without him. At first, Jonathan and Claire wandered aimlessly, half expecting to hear his laughter or see his shadow darting across the halls. But as the hours passed, they began to notice subtle reminders of his presence everywhere. A crayon drawing left on the kitchen counter depicted Ethan and Max playing in a field of wildflowers, a scene Liam had described during one of his stories. In the garage, Jonathan discovered a note scrawled on a scrap of paper. "Keep building. Love lasts forever." Most touching of all was the photo album Claire found lying open on the coffee table. On the last page, someone had taped a new picture: Ethan, Liam, and Max standing side by side, smiling brightly. It wasn't clear where the photo had come from or even if it was real, but it didn't matter. What mattered was the message it conveyed. Ethan's memory lived on, not just in their hearts, but in the bonds they shared with others. In the weeks that followed, Jonathan and Claire embraced life with renewed purpose. Claire returned to painting, filling canvases with vibrant colors inspired by happier times. Jonathan threw himself into philanthropy, using his wealth and influence to create programs for grieving families. Together, they started volunteering at a local children's hospital, finding solace in helping others navigate their own losses. On their next visit to the cemetery, they placed 2 flowers on Ethan's grave, one for their son and one for the boy who had helped mend their broken hearts. As they stood there hand in hand, Jonathan swore he heard a whispered, "Thank you," carried on the breeze. Though they couldn't see them, they knew Ethan and Liam were watching over them, smiling. Their journey of healing was far from over, but for the first time in years, they faced it with hope instead of despair. They had learned that while death may take loved ones away, it cannot erase the love they leave behind. And sometimes in moments of deepest sorrow, that love finds a way to guide us home. Life after Liam's departure was quieter, but it carried a newfound sense of peace that Jonathan and Claire hadn't felt in years. The absence of the boy who had so mysteriously entered their lives left a void, yet his presence lingered in every corner of their home. It wasn't just the drawings or notes he'd left behind. It was the way he had changed how they saw themselves, each other, and the world around them. For the first time since Ethan's passing, they began to truly live again, embracing both the joy and pain of life without letting grief consume them. Every Sunday morning, Jonathan and Claire returned to the cemetery together. They brought fresh flowers, shared stories about Ethan, and sometimes even laughed as they reminisced about his quirks and adventures. On one such visit, Claire knelt by Ethan's grave and placed 2 bouquets carefully, one for Ethan and another for Liam. "I still don't fully understand what happened," she admitted softly, her voice trembling slightly. "But I know this much. We wouldn't be here standing strong like this if it weren't for him." Jonathan nodded, crouching beside her. "He gave us something we didn't think we could find on our own. Hope. And not just any hope, but the kind that reminds us we're not alone. Even when it feels like the world has turned its back, there are connections we can't see holding us together." As they stood up to leave, Jonathan glanced toward the spot where they had first encountered Liam. The memory of that rainy afternoon flooded back, the boy sitting cross-legged with his tattered teddy bear speaking words that had seemed impossible at the time. Now those same words echoed in his mind like a gentle reminder. Sadness isn't the only way to remember someone. Sometimes, happiness works better. Back at home, the couple continued to honor Ethan's memory in ways they never imagined possible before Liam arrived. Claire rediscovered her passion for baking, filling the kitchen once again with the sweet aroma of chocolate chip cookies. She experimented with new recipes, adding twists inspired by Ethan's favorite flavors. Jonathan often joined her, cracking jokes about how Ethan would have demanded double the chocolate chips and triple the vanilla extract. Their laughter filled the house, mingling with the scent of baked goods and creating moments that felt almost sacred. Meanwhile, Jonathan poured his energy into building projects. What started as small repairs around the house soon evolved into larger endeavors. He built a treehouse in the backyard, a tribute to the fantastical stories Liam had shared about his adventures with Ethan. Though no one climbed into the treehouse anymore, it became a symbol of the bond between father and son, a tangible reminder of the dreams Ethan once held dear. Every nail hammered, every plank sanded, felt like a step closer to healing. The couple also made it a point to reconnect with the community. They volunteered regularly at the local children's hospital, organizing art classes and storytelling sessions for young patients. Watching the kids laugh and create reminded them of Ethan's boundless imagination and curiosity. One day, while setting up supplies for an activity, Claire noticed a little girl clutching a worn stuffed rabbit, an image that instantly brought Liam to mind. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she smiled through them, knowing that love transcends boundaries, whether visible or unseen. Their efforts extended beyond personal healing. They wanted to help others facing similar losses. Inspired by Liam's guidance, Jonathan launched a foundation dedicated to supporting families grieving the loss of a child. Named Ethan's Light, the organization provided counseling services, support groups, and creative outlets like painting and woodworking workshops. The name itself carried deep meaning. Light represented the enduring presence of loved ones, shining brightly even in the darkest times. At the grand opening of the foundation's headquarters, Jonathan delivered a heartfelt speech. Standing before a crowd of supporters, volunteers, and grieving families, he spoke openly about his journey. "For years I thought losing Ethan meant losing myself," he confessed, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "But then someone came into our lives, a boy named Liam, who taught us that love doesn't disappear when someone leaves. It transforms, it grows, and it guides us forward." He paused, glancing at Claire sitting in the front row, her hand resting over her heart. "We created Ethan's Light to share what we've learned, to remind everyone here today that you're not alone. Your loved ones may be gone, but their impact lives on in everything you do, in every moment of kindness you offer to the world." When Jonathan finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. Many attendees approached him afterward, sharing their own stories of loss and gratitude. Among them was a young boy holding a weathered toy car, who shyly asked, "Do you think my brother is watching over me too?" Jonathan knelt down to meet the boy's gaze, remembering Liam's serene smile. "Absolutely," he replied, "and he's proud of you for being brave." Months passed, and Jonathan and Hannah settled into a rhythm of purposeful living. While memories of Ethan remained vivid, they no longer carried the sharp sting of sorrow. Instead, they evoked warmth, a comforting reminder of the love that had shaped their family. On quiet evenings, they sat together under the stars, talking about the future instead of dwelling on the past. Claire dreamed of traveling to places Ethan had always wanted to visit, while Jonathan envisioned expanding the foundation to reach more people in need. One crisp autumn evening, as golden leaves swirled around the backyard, Jonathan and Claire found themselves standing beneath the old oak tree where Liam used to sit. A gentle breeze rustled the branches above, carrying with it the faint scent of earth and wildflowers. For a moment they both froze, sensing something, or someone, nearby. "Do you feel that?" Claire whispered, gripping Jonathan's arm. "I do," he replied, his voice barely audible. They stood there silently, listening to the whispers of the wind. Then, as suddenly as it had come, the sensation faded. But neither of them doubted what they had felt. The lingering presence of Ethan and Liam, watching over them from wherever they now resided. Hand in hand, Jonathan and Claire walked back inside, leaving the treehouse bathed in moonlight behind them. Life would never be the same without Ethan or Liam, but they had learned to carry their loved ones' spirits within them, not as weights, but as wings lifting them toward brighter days. And though they couldn't see them, they knew Ethan and Liam were smiling, content in the knowledge that their love had guided Jonathan and Claire back to life.